Shalom Aleichem, my friends. We will say a few words of Musar relating, of course, to Parashat Shavua, the parasha that's coming up with this coming Shabbat, Parashat Vayigash. The story of Yosef, the righteous, goes on to the paroxysm of the saga of Yosef HaTzadik and his brothers. We already discussed in the last two parashiot, Parashat Vayigash and Parashat Miketz, when finally Yosef is in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, and because of his knowledge and his wisdom and the fact that he was able to, like a prophet, to interpret the dreams of Paro, to the total satisfaction of the heart of Paro, to the point that Paro became so inspired by the wisdom of Yosef that he said to him, "Hanimtza kazeh ish asher ruach Elohim bo." Can we find anyone in all the country of Egypt, in the whole world, a man in whom we can find the Spirit of God in him, like Yosef? Those magic words, those words became the basis for which he gave full authority to Yosef, to the point that Yosef became responsible for the country of the land of Egypt, and he became practically, although he was just a viceroy, but nevertheless he was considered the king of Egypt, because all the power was in his hands. We know, of course, the rest of the story from the beginning till this parasha, Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda approached Yosef. Yehuda doesn't know yet, he did not recognize Yosef, same also for his brothers. However, Yosef recognized them, as the Torah tells us, Vehem lo hikiruhu, Vayaker Yosef et Echav, Vehem lo hikiruhu. And Yosef recognized his brothers when they appeared before him, but they did not recognize him. What happened? At the conclusion of the last week's parasha, Miketz, we read that Benhaim was authorized by his father Yaakov to go together with his brothers to the land of Egypt so that they can bring food to his family. Apparently food was lacking everywhere. The whole world came to the land of Egypt because of the wisdom of Yosef. Egypt was well prepared before the world to supply the world, and whoever comes to buy the food will find plenty of food. Yaakov sent his children, despite the fact that it was difficult for him to separate himself from his younger son Benhaim. But finally, because of the pressure applied upon him by Yehuda, who said to his father, "Let him take Benhaim with us, because that's the demand of the ruler of Egypt." He meant Yosef, of course, who insisted that Benhaim should come back. He wants to see him. If he wants to be them, that he should believe them. So he had no choice. So he begged his father, and he said to him, "My father, give me the responsibility of our brother Benhaim, and I shall bring him back to you. Otherwise, I will practically renounce my share in the world to come and my share in the building of the nation of Israel." That's how our sages explained. שלא להיות עם סגולה בקרב ישראל. He gave up his own spiritual future in that promise. And that's why Yaakov agreed finally to send with him and the rest of his brothers Benjamin. And then we read at the end of last week's parasha that Yosef apparently behaved in a very crooked way. How? He planted in the bag of Benjamin the personal cup of Paro. And then, after the departure of his brothers with Benjamin, when everyone is loaded with food and gifts that Yosef gave them, and here comes the special envoy of Yosef. The cup of Paro has disappeared, and we are told that we have to search in your luggage. They opened, knowing that they did not steal the cup. All of them opened their bags. After the search, the cup was found in the bag of Benjamin. Now Yosef said, Benjamin must stay with me. Yehuda says, we are all slaves. We are willing to stay. He says, no. Yosef says, no, you can go back to your father, but I will keep your brother here, Benjamin, because he's the one who stole the bag, the cup, therefore he stays with me. Yehuda, full of fury, he cannot go back to his father with the rest of his brothers without Benjamin. He promised to bring him back. What is he going to do now? This week's parasha begins with the words Vayigash elav Yehuda, Vayomer bi Adoni. And Yehuda approached Yosef and he said to him, you cannot give me back. Either you keep all of us here as your slaves, or you have to give me back Benjamin. Anyway, the dialogue continues in such a way that there is a great danger, either from the brothers of Yosef, from Yehuda, who, according to our tradition, he could have handled with his great power, he practically could have destroyed the land of Egypt. That's according to the Midrashim. Yosef knew the power of his brothers, and perhaps he was afraid that this should come up to this kind of situation. He finally could not hide anymore his identity, and he suddenly started to cry, and he said, please get out, everyone get out, except those people. He meant his brothers. When he was alone with his brothers, he said to them, Ani Yosef achichem, I am Yosef, your brother, the brother that you have sold to the land of Egypt. Asher mechartem oti mitzrayma, ha'od avichem chai, is my father still alive? What was the answer? All the brothers stood there petrified. ולא יכלו אחיו לענות אותו, כי נבהלו מפניו. They could not answer back. They were stupefied. They stood there as paralyzed, petrified, not knowing what to answer. Our sages explains that from this we understand that this rebuke is so great. I mean, the revelation here of Yosef appearing before them, showing them that all his dreams came true, that they all prostrate, but they bowed before him, exactly as he dreamt long time ago, 13 years ago, when he had the dream that even his father hollered at him and he said to him, Havo navo ani ve'immecha ve'achecha lishtahavot lecha arza? Do you want me? You want the sun, the moon, which means me, your father and your mother and your brothers, the 11 stars. They should all of them should come and bow before you. which was, of course, what triggered the terrible hatred and the resentment coming from the brothers against their brother Yosef. And we explained in the past that this is a situation that cannot be understood by anyone. It's impossible to believe that the brothers, who are an example for every Jew, the tribes of Israel, Shiftei Ya'edut LeIsrael, those are the tribes which we consider the most righteous people. Our fathers, our forefathers, how could they hate so much their young brother Yosef to the point of murdering him, and then after renouncing the idea of killing him, they decided that they should sell him to the land of Egypt, perhaps worse than killing him, because sending him to the land of Egypt, selling him as a slave there, means that the soul of Yosef will disappear completely. Perhaps it would have been better to murder him. But we cannot understand, despite the explanations of our sages, how they judged him and how they looked at him, and all the reasons that you could tell us. It is impossible for any one of us to fathom the possibility that such righteous people would come to such a low, to hate their brothers to the point of murdering him. And what about their father, when he doesn't see anymore his beloved son Yosef? This cannot be explained by any explanation that is given to us by our sages. And our sages know that, so that we should believe that this is in reality God's plan himself, from the beginning of the world, from the creation of the world. God that has already planned it this way, that the Jewish people will become the nation of God, chosen by God. But to become chosen by God, it's not easy. The brothers must go to the land of Egypt. What will cause them to go to the land of Egypt? By selling their brother to the land of Egypt. After being a slave, the brother will become a king of Egypt. Yosef became the king. And then the world will lack food. There is no food. 7 years of terrible famine. And they all have to go to Egypt to get supplies. Since Yosef was the master of Egypt, and according to his great wisdom and his great interpretation of the dreams of Paro, he was able now to supply the world. And that's how the land of Mitzrayim became the richest country in the world. Among them, even Yaakov, out of desperation, our sages explain not that he was not lacking food, but he had to behave like he needed food also in the eyes of the neighbors, the non-Jews, for what we call Ayin Hara, the evil eye. So he was in agreement finally to send his children to Egypt, where we find that Yosef, before he revealed his identity to them, he demanded Benhaim to come also. And then Yehuda, as we said before, he had to tell his father, please, father, give me Benhaim, I shall be responsible for them. So what is it that our sages said in the Talmud? That all this was so that our forefathers will go to the land of Egypt. Isn't this what happened? Because of Yosef becoming the king of Egypt, finally, after the revelation of his identity to his brothers, and finally Yaakov himself, the father, learned that his son Yosef is still alive, he also decided to go down to Egypt. And he lived there for 17 years. And then after the father dies, and all the brothers died, their generations after them became the people of Israel in the land of Egypt. For a long time they were in the land of Egypt. In the beginning they were beloved, they were respected, they were honored. But little by little, There's no more that Paro who was in the time of Yosef. Another Paro came, and he hated the Jews. And they were afraid of the Jews that they might become the masters of Egypt. And then, as we know from the beginning of the book of Shemot, right? Exodus, that's when Paro decided to throw every male, every baby to the Nile. And that's how our forefathers became slaves in Egypt. For a long time, 210 years, they were enslaved cruelly in the land of Egypt. Why? As we have explained in the past, so that they will gain those three great characters. Baishanim, people who are shy. By being slaves, they became people with shyness in their nature. Rahmanim, they became also people compassionate, full of compassion. Our sages explained that when they were enslaved, they helped each other out of compassion and love. And finally, loving kindness, helping one another, gomle chasadim. Those three characteristics were essential to be in the nature of that nation which was to become the nation of God. There is no other way for them to become such a nation. God knew that only the grandchildren of Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov will be His nation, but His nation cannot be just any nation like the nation of the world. They have to be special. To be special, first they have to acquire those three characters, the three traits of character, essential, as we have explained before. And now they are going to be ready to accept, to be willing to accept, to receive the Torah. The Torah cannot be given to other human beings who are cruel, who don't know the meaning of loving each other and so forth. But the people of Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov, those descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov, were chosen by God to be, and therefore there was no choice. They had to be enslaved, so that this nature will become planted in them. And then they were brought after the great deliverance, after the great redemption from Egypt. They came to the mountain of Sinai. At the mountain of Sinai, before they received the Torah, because they came a few days, they stayed at the mountain of Sinai, where the divine presence rested and transformed their memory, transformed their personality from the personality of a slave to become the human beings endowed with compassion, of course, and all the traits of character that we have mentioned, plus the mind of a king, from the mind of a slave, which cannot receive the Torah, to the mind in a few days, because of the divine presence that rested at the mountain of Sinai, they were given a mind of a king. Now they are ready to accept the Torah, which indeed what happened. When God said, would you like to accept my Torah? The Jewish people were willing to accept, and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. According to our studies, even the nations heard. Check in Masechet Shabbat, check everywhere, that the nations of the world heard the voice of God, saying, would you like to accept my Torah? And they could not accept, because they cannot go, the Torah cannot go with their inner nature. But the Jewish people, after being enslaved, yes, they were capable. And that's why we became the people, the nation of Torah, the nation of God. That's the reason for all this terrible drama that happened between Yosef and brothers for the ultimate goal to bring them to the mountain of Sinai so that they can receive the Torah. And since then, we have been proclaimed as the nation of God. For that, we have suffered terribly in the past. The Jewish people still suffer from anti-Semitism and all the things and the persecution that still follow till today. Why? So that we should remember whom we are, so that we should be kept different than all the nations. But to be kept different from all the nations, that does not mean that we should behave with any kind of arrogance. Like some people think, we have been chosen, so we are arrogant. Some of the non-Jews, they hate us because they think we are arrogant. No, definitely not. That's not the Jewish way. Remember, the first gift that was given to the nation of Israel is baishanim, shy. Shyness comes from humbleness. In front of the nations of the world, the Jewish people must keep itself in front of them with humbleness, with shyness, always ready to have compassion for others, Jews or not Jews. And indeed, the Jews excelled in their compassion vis-à-vis any kind of human beings. And gomle chasadim, people who behaved always with loving kindness and charity. Jews are known everywhere, throughout the generations, that they have been charitable towards any kind of human being. Unfortunately, we cannot say the same about the nations vis-à-vis the Jewish people. They have persecuted us. They have dealt with us with terrible cruelty. Anti-Semitism is such a cruel thing against the Jewish people, because Jewish nation did not do anything wrong against the humanity of the world. In fact, quite the contrary. They benefited any country which had a Jewish population in it. Any country which got rid of the Jewish population went down and slumbered in the world after being very successful. And yet the world does not recognize any of these. And anti-Semitism continues to go on. Unfortunately, even though there are many non-Jews who recognize that, and of course they deplore this situation, no question about it. But at the same time, in the character of the non-Jewish world, it is known, like our sages said, Halacha hi Esav soneh leYaakov. It's a law of nature that Esav, which means, of course, it's the name, the identity of the non-Jewish world, they hate the Jewish people. But we have to keep in mind, we Jews have to keep in mind that the reason God wanted it this way is so that the Jewish people will know that we are different. If we are considered to be the nation of God, teaching only goodness, charity and compassion and humbleness everywhere, to be the nation of God is not easy. So that we should remember that we have been separated from the nations. That's not a reason for the nations to hate us so much. But that's what happened, unfortunately. The prophecy says that one day the nations will recognize that and they will join also. Hopefully, but right now we still hear about so many cases of anti-Semitism, especially now again, after 2,000 years of persecutions and killing and massacres and things that are so cruel. Unbelievable. But one thing is our consolation. We are still here. We are still alive, as we say, Am Yisrael Chai. All this started by the fact that the tribes, the children of Yaakov, hated maybe their brother Yosef. But this was all the doing of God, so he can have his personal nation, the nation that will teach the world many of the traits of characters which are already found in the nature of every Jew, whether the world likes to hear that or not. But the wise people among the non-Jewish world, they know that very well, and they admit it. No question about it. We have to respect the world. We have to respect all the nations. Even those who made us suffer, we should respect them and honor them and everything. Until the day when God will proclaim His law throughout all the world. And finally the world will follow the great truth of the Torah and will give the proper respect to the Jewish people since they deserve it. But in the meantime, we are still here to say, Am Israel Chai. Israel, the nation of Israel, is alive and eternal. Shabbat Shalom.